Hello and welcome to Effortless Mastery. Today we'll be doing a very interesting topic, and that will be salvage pathway of nucleotide synthesis. So we'll be starting our topics on metabolism of nucleic acids, but specifically we'll be dwelling on salvage pathways. So very quickly, what is metabolism about? Metabolism is about synthesis and breakdown. So it's broadly, metabolism is a big term, which is broadly divided into synthesis, which is anabolism, and breakdown, which is called catabolism. Now, in nucleic acids, the synthesis is by two pathways, de novo synthesis and salvage synthesis. What's the difference in these pathways? De novo is when you are forming something from raw materials. That means for us to form a nucleotide, say for example, adenosine monophosphate, we have to pick up everything we are using to form it is different raw materials that are not connected to it. Then salvage pathway is when after a destruction, you are picking something that looks like it and just adding to it. I'll recap and explain that better. I'll use a company like some companies like Coca-Cola company who work with drinks. So at the start, what they usually did was that they will produce the bottle, they will produce the drink, and produce everything necessary. That was de novo. When they have to look for materials to produce bottle, look for materials to produce drink, look for material before they could now make up the Coca-Cola we know. But right now, what they are doing is that after you are done drinking, you are expected to return the bottle. So right now, the companies are not really producing bottles again. All they need to produce is the liquid to put inside the bottle to make a drink. That is salvage pathway. But when you have to start to produce everything all over again, that's de novo. So for nucleic acids, usually, de novo pathway requires a lot of energy since you are starting from the scratch. But salvage most times will not require a lot of energy. You don't need to do it. And some cells of the body cannot even do de novo. So they will rely on the salvage pathway. They will rely on the salvage pathway. Now, what do we need to know about salvage pathway? So for nucleotide synthesis, I'm going to be doing it both for purines and for pyrimidines. But for us to understand, we have to go back to what a nucleotide looked like. What did a nucleotide look like? A nucleotide was always having a sugar, having phosphates attached to number 5 or number 3 prime, and then having the base attached to which number? Number 1 prime. That was what we called a nucleotide. We had a sugar which could either be ribose or deoxyribose, having a base attached to its own number 1 prime, and having a phosphate attached with either its number 5 prime or number 3 prime. Now, what happens is, after breakdown of nucleotides come inside the cell like we had learned earlier. They were broken down using nucleotidases to give us nucleosides, broken down to give us sugar and base. Now, there is a way to now use the base alone to form back a nucleotide. So this case whereby I'm using the base that was gotten from a breakdown to try forming back a nucleotide. That's what we call the salvage pathway. And the question would be, the base is just base alone, but the nucleotide will need base, sugar, and phosphates. So now, we now get to observe that if I choose to do a reaction in which to the base, I add maybe sugar first, and after that, I now add phosphates, you realize that will be how many steps? A 2-step reaction. So I had base alone, you add sugar first. So when you add sugar, what does it become? Nucleoside. You now add phosphate, what does it now become? Nucleotide. So for the 1-step, for 2-step, observe something. You had a base. So when you add sugar, you have nucleoside. You add phosphate, you now have nucleotide. So that is me. How do I move from base here? So first one is that I can do base plus sugar. I form nucleoside. Then from here, I now add phosphates and form nucleotide. That's 2 steps. But there's a 1-step process where directly from base, I can form a nucleotide. What do you think I'll be adding? I'll be adding a sugar phosphate at the same time. So a sugar that already has a phosphate at the same time. That's what will move me directly from base the nucleotide, and that's called one step. I will quickly recap that for salvage pathways, we are aiming to move from the nitrogenous base straight to its nucleotide. Now, there are two ways of arriving at this. First, I can add a sugar to my base to form a nucleoside, then now add phosphate to that nucleoside to form a nucleotide. That will be a two-step synthesis. But I can add sugar and phosphate at once to a base to now form a nucleotide, and that will be called one-step synthesis. Usually, we now in chemistry or in biochemistry, the only donor of phosphate sugar at the same time is a molecule called phosphoribosyl pyrophosphate, PRPP. Phosphoribosyl pyrophosphate, PRPP. And if you look at the structure, observe something. That in the structure of phosphoribosyl pyrophosphate, the phosphate, one of the phosphate is on number 5 prime. It's also a ribose. So one of the phosphate is on number 5, whereas the PP, that is the inorganic PP, that is pyrophosphate, is on number 1 carbon. Observe something. It gives you a similar structure to what a nucleotide would have been. The only difference is that I have a phosphate on number 5. I have a sugar moiety here, which is ribose. The only difference is that in a nucleotide, you're having base on number 1 prime, and then you're having pyrophosphate in PRPP on number 1 prime. I hope you observe the difference. So what do we do in salvage pathway? We are going to be transferring these phosphates and this ribose to the base. So here I already have a base. So what will I transfer? The phosphate and the ribose together to add to the base. And once I add it, what do I now form? A nucleotide. So all it now makes is that the base is coming in to replace the pyrophosphate. The base will come and replace it. So I will now be forming a nucleotide, or the pyrophosphate will come out. Now, and the name of the enzyme for that one-step reaction will always be, is transferring, what is it transferring? It's transferring phosphoribosyl. So the name will always be phosphoribosyl transferase. So very quickly, let's look at it. For purines, there are two ways of synthesizing purines: one-step synthesis and two-step. One step can be done by all purines, commonly guanine, adenine, and then even hypoxanthine. They can all do one step, but two-step can only be done by adenine. What did I call one step? Where you are transferring the phosphate and ribose at once. But then what did I call two-step? You add ribose first, then you now add phosphate. All right, so now let's look at it. For this one that can be done by all, guanine, who did I say will be the donor of the ribose and phosphate all at once? PRPP. Guanine will react with PRPP. This PR is transferred. PR is phosphoribose, which is phosphate and ribose, transferred to guanine to form a nucleotide called guanosine monophosphate. And the PP will come out as pyrophosphate. What's the name of the enzyme? The enzyme will be called phosphoribosyl transferase. Why? It is transferring phosphoribosyl. So phosphoribosyl transferase. So that is that for that. What else should we know? Similarly, the same thing happens here. I'm transferring PR to hypoxanthine to form phosphoribosyl transferase, to form IMP, and the enzyme is the same enzyme. Over here, same thing. You are always transferring phosphoribosyl from PRPP. So you are transferring phosphate and sugar to a base. What will you form? A nucleotide. We should have base sugar phosphate. Now observe something. The enzyme for the first two are common. We call it hypoxanthine guanine. Hypoxanthine guanine phosphoribosyl transferase. But for adenine, it is one single enzyme, adenine phosphoribosyl transferase. So please, it's the same enzyme that acts on guanine that can act on hypoxanthine. For that reason, we give it a common name, hypoxanthine guanine phosphoribosyl transferase. That will be the same name for hypoxanthine. But for adenine, we'll call it adenine phosphoribosyl transferase. For the two-step process, which can only be done by who? Adenine. First, adenine will react with the ribose 1-phosphate. And in this case, this is us trying to look at a ribose that has phosphate on number 1. So when adenine reacts with this ribose 1-phosphate, the phosphate will be replaced with the adenine, so that the phosphate will come out as inorganic phosphate. But together, adenine, which is a base, and ribose, which is a sugar, will form what? Adenosine. That is expected, which is a nucleoside. So observe in this two-step process, first and foremost, my base is reacting with a sugar phosphate. It replaces the phosphate on number 1. Phosphate originally, if we were looking at a nucleotide, because that could be a question raised in your mind. If we are looking at a nucleotide, phosphate should always be on number 5, not on 1. So when it is on 1 and base is trying to enter, base cannot enter number 5. So what does base do? You will go and replace the phosphate on number 1, forming a structure that will now look like this, having base. So all I'm doing is that I have replaced my phosphate with base. Why? Phosphate should not be on number 1. It should be on number what? 5. So that is that for that. So once I replace it, I'm having adenosine and pi. The enzyme name here is called, is going to be a pyrophosphorylase. We name it this other way. It's called a nucleoside phosphorylase. It's actually named backward because this is somehow a reversible reaction. That I can add pyrophosphorylase are enzymes that add phosphate to a compound, aim at cleaving that compound. So I can add inorganic phosphate to adenosine, split it so that I will now have adenine and ribose 1-phosphate. So that is the name of the enzyme. From here, this adenosine that is a nucleoside, to add phosphate to it, we're actually using enzymes called kinase. Specifically, the name here will be called adenosine kinase. Adenosine kinase. What is it doing? Adenosine kinase is transferring. Kinase are enzymes that transfer phosphates from one person to another. Usually from this, it could be from substrate to co-substrate, or it could even be from co-substrate to substrate. In this case, the carrier of the phosphate is ATP. So one of the phosphate is transferred from ATP to adenosine. So when I transfer one to him, it becomes AMP. Remember, he was just having, I'm transferring it to number 5. So this is where it's coming into. And once it comes in, I'm forming AMP. And then that will be ATP becoming ADP. Why? He has lost 1 phosphate. Where is that 1 phosphate going to? Adenosine to form AMP. So that covers new purines. For pyrimidines have only one-step synthesis, in which no matter the pyrimidine, you can think of cytosine, think of thiamine, think of uracil. One thing will always be common, that for them, you always donate PR. You transfer pyrophosphate, that is phosphoribosylate from PRPP. You give it to them, and they will always form their nucleotides. An example would be if this was cytosine. Cytosine will do this reaction and it will form CMP, which is cytosine monophosphate. So that is that for that. Please, the nucleotide of hypoxanthine is called inosine monophosphate. So that covers that for our salvage pathways of nucleotide synthesis. What are the key things to really take out from this video? You get to observe that in salvage pathway, I am beginning with the base. I'm not starting from the scratch. When we do the novel, you're going to enjoy yourself. I'm beginning with the base. I'm aiming at the nucleotide of that base. So what do I need to form a nucleotide? Sugar and phosphate. In one-step synthesis, we are transferring the sugar and phosphate at once in the form of phosphoribosylate. From who? PRPP. So the name of the enzyme for them will always be phosphoribosylate transferase. Whereas when I'm dealing with two-step synthesis, which is only done by adenine, in that two-step synthesis, I'll add sugar first to the base to form a nucleoside. Then I add phosphate to the nucleoside to now form a nucleotide. So who can do one step in purines? All. Guanine, hypoxanthine, adenine. Then in two-step, only adenine. For pyrimidines do one step. So they are transferring both at once. Thank you so much for being with us today. I believe that this video was as explanatory as possible. Now, ensure you subscribe to this channel. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe to this channel. You cannot be missing our videos. Now, ensure you like this video. Type out any question you have in the comment section. And if this video helped you, please ensure you also mention it in the comment section. Share this video to as many students as possible across your country, across your state. People have to see this video and understand these topics that give students struggles. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, when we'll have to now look at the de novo synthesis of purines and pyrimidines.